Okay friends, it's time to get started on our job. One of the first things you want to do is safely raise and support the front of the vehicle so the wheel's up off the ground and the suspension is hanging. The next thing we're going to do is move along to removing all 5 of our 19mm lug nuts and then the wheel. After that, we're going to go ahead and remove this shield right here. If you were to look along the front of it, you're going to find 4 plastic push clips. Let's go ahead and remove all 4 of those, and then we'll make our way to the inboard side and remove the 2 that are in there. Now, when you remove these, you only want to grab onto the outer portion. This inner portion is going to stay up there. Once you separate it, it should unlock. Let's make our way in here for the last 2. Let's make our way right over here. This is your left front outer tie rod end. Here's an adapter. We need to go ahead and loosen this clamp. To do that, I'll just use a 15mm socket, loosen this nut, and break this free. Now let's go ahead and follow that bar all the way over to where it connects onto a bracket, which leads to our steering stabilizer shock. If you were to look along the back side of this, you're going to find a stud that protrudes towards the rear of the vehicle, and it has an 18mm nut. Remove the nut and then remove the shock from this bracket. Now we can grab the shock and slide it off of the stud. Of course, it's going to be a good idea to thoroughly inspect this shock. You want to make sure you don't see any fluid coming out of this. If you do, the shock itself could be bad, and if that's the case, now's the time to replace it. Now we can continue following that bar all the way over to where it connects onto the right front knuckle. There's a 21mm nut that holds the tie rod to the knuckle. Go ahead and remove that nut and then put it back on there a couple threads. Let's use a hammer to break this free. To do this, I'm going to come right along the knuckle right here. Give it a couple loving bonks, but you want to be very careful not to damage your backing plate or even your brakes. Alright, so now that this is down, we're going to start unscrewing this by turning it clockwise, the opposite direction than you would normally turn things to loosen them. But also, while we're turning this clockwise, we want to count the amount of rotations it takes to fully remove it from the other side. 1, 2, and so on. There it is, friends. So now that we have that out of there, let's pay close attention to this area here. The small shaft that you see right there is part of the outer tie rod end. This is actually an adapter. The main area that we want to pay attention to is the threading on the adapter. That's where that other tie rod end is going to screw onto. So all I'm going to do is go ahead and clean it up, and then I'll apply a little bit more copper never sees. Okay, now it's going to be time to get ready to install our brand new tie rod. When you do this, you want to make sure you put the clamp on. You want to have it in the proper direction, so when you go to tighten it, it's going to look just like this. Now let's go ahead and take that tie rod, we're going to line it up. We're going to have to turn this counterclockwise to screw it in. Keep in mind, as you're doing this, you want to count the same amount of turns as it took to remove it originally. Once you have that back in its original position, just make your way down to the passenger side. We're going to make sure that the tie rod lines up with the knuckle the way that it should. There we are. Go ahead and take that nut and start it on there. Let's go ahead and snug this and we'll torque it to 63 foot-pounds. Once you have it torqued, the next thing you want to do is pay attention to the stud. Looking at the stud right here, you can see that it has a hole. On the nut, you can see it has a whole bunch of castle-type slots. Now what you want to do is have one of those slots lined up with the corresponding hole. If for some reason it is not, continue tightening until the very next slot is. After that, put in a brand new cotter pin. Now let's make our way over towards the driver's side. Now if you were to feel up along the top of our tie rod end, you're going to feel that you have a slit. That slit ends right here. That's something that I want to pay attention to. The next thing I'm going to do is take my clamp, and I'm going to go ahead and put it so it's approximately halfway up that slit. Yep, I got some slit on this side and on that. I've got my bolt facing up, which is going to crimp this down right along that slit. Now let's go ahead and use two 24 millimeters. We're going to use one to hold the backside and one to tighten the nut. Make sure this is nice and tight. Make your way to the center. We're going to start securing our stabilizer shock. Now for this, all you want to do is make sure that the hole lines up with the stud. Typically, you're just going to have to go ahead and squeeze this in a little bit and try to line it up. Slide it right on over there. Now we can start on our nut and tighten it up. Once you have it snug, torque this nut to 50 foot-pounds. Let's get our shield back up on here. We're going to line up all 6 of our push pin holes. Once you get it lined up, go ahead and start putting in the push pins. You want to push in the outer aspect first. Once it slides into position, go ahead and lock it down with the center. Okay, at this point we can go ahead and put our wheel back up on here. After that, go ahead and start on all 5 of your 19 millimeter lug nuts. And then when we get the wheel back on the ground, we'll go ahead and torque each of them to 122 foot-pounds. All right, with the wheel back on the ground, let's go ahead and torque these. Torqued. Okay friends, we got our front end back together. What's left to do now? Now of course you're going to want to safely take it for a road test, listen for any funny noises, and of course get yourself down to your local alignment shop. Thanks for watching.